Breaking news from the United States government. The U.S. is poised to ease restrictions on marijuana in historic shift, but it'll remain a controlled substance. Let's get into some of these details. I'm going to show you some of the highlights of this article and what all this means, because it essentially didn't really do anything. And on the back end, at the end, I'll give you my thoughts. Let's check out the highlights of the article first. The U.S. DEA will move to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug, a historic shift to generations of American drug policy that could have wide ripple effects across the country. The proposal, which still must be reviewed by the White House Office of Management and Budget, would recognize the medical uses of cannabis and acknowledge it has less potential for abuse than some of the nation's most dangerous drugs. However, it would not legalize marijuana outright for recreational use. And it would still be classified as a drug, not just descheduled like what the industry wanted. We wanted it removed completely. But let's keep going. The agency's move, confirmed to the AP on Tuesday by 5 people, clears the last significant regulatory hurdle before the agency's biggest policy change in more than 50 years can take effect. Once OMB signs off, the DEA will take public comment on the plan to move marijuana from its current classification as a Schedule I drug alongside heroin and LSD. It moves pot to Schedule III alongside ketamine and some anabolic steroids, following a recommendation from the Federal Health and Human Services Department. After the public comment period and a review by the administrative judge, the agency would eventually publish the final rule. I love that wording when they say it would eventually do it sometime, just like Virginia, where they legalize it and a year later you still can't buy cannabis there. So maybe there's a timeline on there, but as of right now, I don't see one. Today, the Attorney General circulated a proposal to reclassify marijuana from Schedule I to Schedule III. Once published by the federal registrar, it will initiate a formal rulemaking process as prescribed by Congress in the Controlled Substances Act. Now, they could just amend the Controlled Substances Act, because I have to remind everybody again, laws are made in Congress. They're enforced by the DEA. The Controlled Substances Act gave the DEA authority over it. It could also remove the authority from it. You see what I'm saying? Okay, let's keep going. The election year announcement could help Biden, a Democrat, boost flagging support, particularly among young voters. Now, he's hemorrhaging young voter support across all demographics because of other issues going on that I don't really want to get into here right now. But he also has not fulfilled his campaign promise of legalizing cannabis. So he's going to pitch this as, look, I did something, when he didn't do what he said he was going to do. But he's going to expect you to be okay with it anyway. Don't be. I'm not telling you to vote for. I'm just telling you to hold people to their word. Whoever it is, right or left. Left, right? Yeah, you get it. Biden and a growing number of lawmakers from both political parties have been pushing for the DEA decision as marijuana has become increasingly decriminalized and accepted, particularly by younger people. Gallup poll found 70% of adults support legalization, highest level yet recorded, always pun intended, by the polling firm, and more than double the roughly 30% who backed it in 2000. The DEA didn't respond to repeated requests for comment. How does losing taste? Losers. Focus on other things. Schedule III drugs are controlled substances and subject to rules and regulations, and people who traffic in them without permission could still face federal criminal prosecution. Some critics argue the DEA shouldn't change course on marijuana, saying it isn't necessary and could lead to harmful side effects. But in terms of getting us clear to use our resources to combat other major drugs, that's positive. Noting that fentanyl alone accounts for more than 100,000 deaths in the U.S. a year. So like I said, focus on other bigger things. On the other end of the spectrum, others argue cannabis should be treated the way alcohol is. That's what I keep saying. Why not? Federal drug policy has lagged behind many states in recent years, having 38 having already legalized medical marijuana and 24 legalizing its recreational use. Coming up on half the country. right? But more than half the country lives in states where there is legal cannabis in some form, medical or recreational. That's helped fuel fast growth in the industry with an estimated worth of nearly $30 billion. It's way past that. Easing federal regulations could reduce the tax burden that could be 70% or more for businesses, according to industry groups. It could also make it easier to research marijuana since it's very difficult to conduct authorized clinical studies on Schedule I substances. The immediate effect of rescheduling on the nation's criminal justice system would likely be more muted since federal prosecutions for simple possession have been fairly rare in recent years. Loosening restrictions could carry a host of unintended consequences in the drug war and beyond. Critics point out, the Schedule III drug, marijuana could remain regulated by DEA. That means roughly 15,000 cannabis dispensaries in the U.S. would have to register with the DEA like regular pharmacies and fulfill strict reporting requirements, something that they are loath to do and that the DEA is ill-equipped to handle. So that means that shouldn't happen. Then there's the United States. This part's really interesting. And they always put the conclusion and the punchline at the end. Check it out. Very end of the article. Then there's the United States international treaty obligations. Chief among them, the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, which requires the criminalization of cannabis. In 2016, during the Obama administration, the DEA cited the U.S. international obligations and the findings of a federal court of appeals in Washington in denying a similar request to reschedule marijuana. So what's interesting about that is that in 2016, during the Obama administration, the DEA denied a request for scheduling marijuana. Interesting. Also, bigger, did you know that the United States was obligated by an international treaty of 1961 by the United Nations? I didn't know that for a long time. I've known it for a couple years now, but I didn't know that for the majority of my life because why would I? They don't teach us that. So that's going to be one of my next videos, is deep diving that 1961 convention, what it says, what they did, why it even happened. But it's interesting to note, and you can check out this last podcast I did with Willie's World. We talk about it briefly. Not many people know about this 1961 convention, and it sets the standard for the entire world. Germany legalized, Malta, Luxembourg, Thailand did, and then they're rescinding it. But anyways, all these other states and countries, nation states, are taking matters into their own hands because they have things on their mind. They realize that kind of thing. Okay, who's going to enforce this? Nobody. Okay, so that's the news. That's the breaking news. It really doesn't do anything. It's not even into effect immediately. It still has to go through a process, approval, assuming, let's say Biden does get reelected. Who knows when it will even be happening. If he doesn't, Trump or whoever wins could come in and say no. Like I said, laws are made in Congress. They're not made by enforcement agencies. Enforcement agencies are given powers of enforcement by the laws passed by Congress. That's how this works. So if you want to repeal the Controlled Substances Act or amend it to just remove cannabis, that would be way easier, in my opinion. Not only that, this also, they talk about it's going to be beneficial for businesses to make money. It didn't say anything about legalizing banking. All it did was reschedule it to a medicinal use. Changes nothing financially. There are safe banking laws that right now are actually going to probably be grouped in with a crypto stablecoin law, surprisingly enough, because crypto and cannabis actually are surprisingly working together. Algorand blockchain is partnered with the hemp blockchain that's going to track and trace all cannabis. So more coming on that. There's a lot to unpack. But needless to say, this kind of does something, but kind of doesn't really. So I'm going to kind of go celebrate something that kind of doesn't really do anything. But it's a big step because it's the first time in 50 years that we've done anything, but yet it really kind of doesn't do anything. Nobody got out of jail because of this. Nobody's immediately benefiting from this, is what I'm trying to say. But I guess silver linings are silver linings. Take little wins where you can. I'm just of the nature of, I think we're past the point of being patient for these things and just letting the top down determine when we get plants. It doesn't make any sense to me. So next video, or one of the next couple of videos, is going to be about the single convention. And I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to kind of go over it just so we all know what it is and why it was even done. So until next time, congratulations on some sort of kind of news. Stay blessed. Don't forget to tip your bud tenders.